Zack Snyder's long-rumoured, long-wished-for, long-campaigned-for, and just plain old-fashioned long film finally hit direct-to-streaming services, and, for Snyder fans, it appears to have been well worth the wait. The little snowball's chance in hell, unicorn that missed the arc film that's been whispered about under bated breaths and shouted for and against in comment boards across the internet is finally here. It'd be an understatement to say that this film had some might call a troubled production. I know a lot of us movie fans know what happened behind the scenes, but for those unfamiliar, Justice League, as directed by Zack Snyder, was due for release in 2017. He had filmed a 4-hour epic, and whether it would be released as two separate films or one slightly edited down film was considered at the time. Either way, during post-production, Snyder was forced to leave the film following the untimely and tragic death of his daughter. Warner Brothers, with a looming release date and an unfinished picture, brought in Joss Whedon to complete it, hoping he would work the same magic he weaved over on Marvel's The Avengers. Whedon, in working with what I would presume is an extremely rough working cut, a dissatisfied studio, and a looming release date window, refilmed, recut, re-aspect ratioed, and finally released a film that was pretty universally panned by film critics alike. There is a whole separate can of worms to be opened by talking about Whedon's career, but I don't think I'm going to delve into that here. I don't think there's any winning scenario in doing that. Whedon worked with what he had when he was filming this movie back in 2017. Entire sequences were scrapped, entire sequences were reshot, 4 hours became 2, and we got a film which was, ultimately, pretty forgettable. Here's where the internet works its weirdness. Release the Snyder Cut became a worldwide movement, and HBO Max, with a hole in its programming and a pocket full of million-dollar bills, gave Snyder the freedom and the money to the sum of $70 million to go back and fulfill his original vision. He was able to complete the special effects, reassemble his cut, re-implement the original score, and even re-film a small epilogue sequence. Snyder, who, due to the death of his daughter, had to step back and let another director helm his work, was able to step back in and finish what he started. And you know what? It's pretty much superior in every real way. The first thing that became immediately apparent as the movie started was the reintegration of the original aspect ratio, which the film was shot in. While watching this recut film, it's clear to see that Snyder was a fan of the IMAX ratio, and, as such, shot the film in that 4:3 aspect which fills an entire IMAX screen. When these films are released for home consumption, they usually have the top and the bottom lopped off, so that what you're actually getting is less of the picture. It's like when they used to release films on VHS. Yeah, VHS. I'm that old. And they would release in full frame, and the sides would be cut off from the cinema experience that you would have experienced while sitting in the cinema. We've pretty much done a full 180 here. I'm not sure I like the way it looks. I mean, we're all pretty accustomed to home media and the way that looks now, and while I'm sure that the Snyder Cut looks incredible on an IMAX screen, it's not like any of us have a local IMAX to pop down to and watch this on, considering it was not released in cinemas to begin with. That's not really Snyder's fault here. When the movie was being filmed, it would have originally been released to cinemas, including IMAX. So, while we get a 4:3 aspect ratio, at least it's restoring the footage he shot, and not taking it away, as they did in Whedon's cut. For what it's worth, after a few minutes of soaking in the gorgeous cinematography and visuals, you pretty much forget about the aspect ratio. And at 4 hours in length, trust me, you have the time to get used to it. Zack Snyder's Justice League at 4 hours in length is a much deeper, richer, and fully realised version of the film we got back in 2017. It's not just that the original footage was just cut back in and slapped together. There are entire sequences that were reshot for the Joss Whedon film that are completely missing here. Gone is the goofy, out-of-place humour. Gone is the strange, agenda-blank villain. Here, we get characters that are fully developed and fleshed out. Steppenwolf is a visually beefed up and redesigned villain. He's even given a full backstory and character arc that feels authentic and considered. I like that, in this version, he's almost sympathetic. He's been banished and just wants to go home, and conquering Earth is just his way back there. Likewise, Cyborg and Flash, both who I consider to be afterthoughts in Whedon's film, are literally the hearts of this film. Cyborg actually has an origin story and is now integral to the plot instead of simply being featured. And Flash has my favourite sequence in the entire film. There are even entire characters that are put back into the film, with Darkseid being set up for what would have been a likely sequel. Additionally, the humour that I thought was cringe-inducing has been replaced with characterisation and, surprisingly, humour that fits more organically within the scene. It's the tonal consistency, either through colour grading or writing, which was my biggest complaint in the first film, that this film nails completely. Another thing I think that this film does better, which I thought was lacking in the theatrical release, is beefier action set pieces, which hit harder in this edit. The escalation of the action works better here, with the general flow of the cinematography being far more consistent. The Justice League, in this new version, are literally set up to be new gods, taking up the mantle in the fight against evil. It's just so much bigger and grander and more epic. So what didn't work for me? Well, even with a 4-hour runtime that didn't really feel like a 4-hour runtime, I think there was definitely a couple of scenes which could have been trimmed. The epilogue chapter? Oh yeah, the film is divided into chapters, like a novel, or a movie that wants to be considered more serious than a superhero film. Take from that what you will. Anyways, the epilogue was designed to further the nightmare future, which was set up in Batman vs Superman. Unless the studios get their shit together and continue Snyder's vision, this is going to be left as fan speculation. This entire sequence is setting up nothing. It was interesting seeing Jared Leto's Joker return, but I felt like it didn't really add much more to the film other than letting Ben Affleck drop the PG-13 breaking F-bomb. There was actually a lot more swearing in this film than I initially expected, and way more blood than the theatrical version. During Wonder Woman's introduction in the film, which in 2 short minutes made up for the entirety of Wonder Woman 1984, there's a scene where she punches a guy into a wall and he leaves a massive blood-smeared impact crater. Steppenwolf's assault on Themyscira is way more gnarly here. He carves his way through the Amazonians, and it's brutal. There was definitely scenes of violence where I was like, yep, that's not very kid-friendly. It's not Deadpool levels of carnage, but it's definitely a step beyond Shazam or Wonder Woman into the realm of more realistic depictions of superheroics. In the end, I enjoyed the Snyder Cut far more than the theatrical cut by Whedon. It's a more complete, cohesive, and coherent vision for the Justice League. It's not hard to see why Restore the Snyderverse is trending across the internet. DC and Warner Brothers have sought to make their superhero films lighter and more optimistic in line with Marvel, and they've been playing catch-up with their shared universe, which is a shame considering that, with the Snyder Cut, I think they'd finally cracked their own formula and succeeded in forging their own path. Hopefully they can continue the momentum built up in the Snyder Cut, rather than in the abysmal Wonder Woman 1984. I give the Snyder Cut a B+. I came into this movie with rock-bottom expectations and was extremely surprised at how effective it was. I'm glad that Snyder was given the chance to finish the film that he helped orchestrate and restore the vision that he had. I never even thought we would actually see this film. I thought the mythological Snyder Cut was something that people pushing the release the Snyder Cut movement were kidding themselves over. So to me, at least, it's pretty mind-blowing that this thing even exists, let alone was released. Maybe one day we'll see if this was a once-off, or if these people pushing the Snyderverse restoration can actually work their magic again. So, have you guys seen Zack Snyder's Justice League? What did you think of it? How many bathroom breaks did you need? Let me know in the comments below, and, as always, more reviews in the coming days. Later days.